He who has learned to govern himself knows no tyrant. What if I told you that many modern relationships don't fall apart because of a lack of love, but because of a quiet power shift you were never taught to notice? What if the difference between a woman becoming your greatest ally or slowly managing, correcting, and reshaping you comes down to how you show up every single day? You've seen it before. First, she supports you. She believes in your vision. She helps you grow. But somewhere along the way, guidance turns into control. Advice turns into supervision. And before you realize it, you're no longer leading your life, you're being handled. This isn't about blaming women. It's about understanding dynamics. Stoicism teaches that confusion thrives where clarity is absent. And when a man lacks inner order, someone else will impose theirs. The question is simple but uncomfortable. Is she acting as your helper, or has she become your handler? In this video, you'll learn how modern dynamics subtly shift, why it happens, and most importantly, how to reclaim calm authority without conflict, resentment, or emotional chaos. Watch till the very end, because the final insight ties everything together, and missing it could mean repeating the same pattern again, just with a different face. Number 1. Support versus supervision. Support and supervision may look similar on the surface, but they feel completely different in your nervous system. One expands you, the other shrinks you. And in modern relationships, that line gets crossed quietly, often under the banner of care, concern, or just trying to help. You can sense it when encouragement turns into correction, when cooperation slowly morphs into oversight. You're no longer being backed, you're being managed. And something inside you resists, even if you can't immediately name why. Support says, I trust your judgment. Supervision says, I don't. Support strengthens your spine. Supervision places a hand on the back of your neck. The Stoics were deeply aware of this distinction, even if they never framed it in modern relational language. Wrote, be content to seem what you really are. Support allows you to become more of what you are. Supervision pressures you to perform a version that keeps someone else comfortable. When support is present, you feel relaxed but focused. There's space to move, to decide, to fail, to adjust. When supervision creeps in, that space collapses. You feel watched, evaluated, quietly corrected. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in tone, timing, suggestions that feel more like instructions than invitations. Over time, that dynamic trains you to either submit or rebel. Neither leads to respect. Neither leads to attraction. Neither leads to growth. From a Stoic lens, supervision violates a core principle, self-governance. Epictetus was clear: no man is free who is not master of himself. True support honors your capacity to self-regulate. It doesn't hover. It doesn't audit. It doesn't track. It assumes competence unless proven otherwise. Supervision, on the other hand, arises from anxiety, and anxiety always seeks control. You might notice that supervision often disguises itself as efficiency, as responsibility, as being on top of things. But beneath it is a subtle lack of faith. Faith in your judgment, faith in your resilience, faith in your ability to learn through friction rather than guidance. And when that faith erodes, polarity erodes with it. Desire weakens, respect thins. You start feeling less like a partner and more like a project. Stoicism teaches you to pause and ask, what is actually within my control? Supervision overreaches. It tries to manage outcomes by managing people. Support does the opposite. It focuses on character, not control. Seneca warned, he who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. Supervision is preemptive suffering. It tries to prevent imagined failure by tightening the reins. Support accepts uncertainty and builds strength instead. This distinction matters because supervision subtly communicates, I need to stay ahead of you. Support says, I walk beside you. One is hierarchical, the other is cooperative, and the body knows the difference instantly. Supervision creates tension. Support creates safety, not the soft, fragile kind, but the grounded kind that allows risk, ambition, and momentum. If you're honest with yourself, supervision often invites passivity. When someone else monitors, reminds, nudges, and corrects, you slowly outsource responsibility, or you harden against it. Either way, initiative suffers. Stoicism pushes you back toward ownership, toward inner authority, toward becoming someone who doesn't need to be managed to move forward. Here, where the work becomes personal. The first practical exercise is internal boundary setting. You begin by noticing your own reactions. Where do you feel irritation, tightness? The urge to explain yourself when no explanation was required. Those sensations are signals. Stoicism teaches attention before action. Don't argue immediately. Observe first. Ask yourself, is this support or is this supervision? Next, practice calm assertion without hostility. Support thrives on clarity. Supervision feeds on silence or explosion. You don't need dramatic speeches. You need grounded presence, a steady tone, few words. You train yourself to respond rather than react. Reminded himself daily to meet interference with composure, not resentment. That composure is power. Another Stoic exercise is negative visualization, but applied relationally. Imagine what happens to your character if supervision continues unchecked, not emotionally but structurally. Do you become sharper or duller, more decisive or more hesitant? Stoicism isn't about comfort. It's about long-term integrity. Anything that slowly erodes your self-trust is not neutral. It's corrosive. You also look inward honestly. Supervision often takes root where leadership is absent. Stoicism demands responsibility before resentment. Are you decisive, consistent, self-directed? The goal isn't to invite control by being passive, nor to tolerate it by being silent. The goal is to embody clarity so supervision has nothing to attach itself to. Daily discipline reinforces this. When your habits are solid, your direction clear, your standards consistent, the relational dynamic shifts naturally. You don't need to demand autonomy. You radiate it. And autonomy, when grounded and calm, invites genuine support rather than oversight. End each day with a brief reflection. Ask yourself, did I act today from self-command or from reaction? Did I reinforce my own authority quietly, or did I give it away through avoidance or aggression? Stoicism grows through these small audits, not grand declarations. Support and supervision are not just relational concepts. They're mirrors of inner order. When you govern yourself well, you require less governance from others. And when support replaces supervision, respect returns. So does energy. So does attraction. The shift begins, as it always does in Stoicism, not by changing someone else, but by refining how you stand in yourself. Number 2, encouragement versus correction. There's a subtle but powerful difference between encouragement and correction, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Encouragement strengthens your spine. Correction slowly bends it. Encouragement says, I believe in your capacity. Correction says, I need to manage your direction. On the surface, both can sound caring. Both can wear the mask of love, but internally they land very differently. One builds momentum. The other quietly installs brakes. And in modern relationships, this difference often determines whether a woman becomes a helper or a handler. You feel it when encouragement is present. There's oxygen in the room, space to think, space to choose, space to grow without being monitored. Encouragement doesn't hover, it doesn't nag, it doesn't audit your progress, it trusts your internal compass. Correction, on the other hand, rarely announces itself as control. It shows up as just trying to help, just being honest, just pointing something out. But over time, it trains you to second-guess yourself, to hesitate, to look outward for approval instead of inward for clarity. The Stoics warned relentlessly about this internal erosion. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because growth requires freedom from constant evaluation. Correction-heavy dynamics replace self-command with self-consciousness. You stop acting from conviction and start acting from anticipation, anticipating feedback, disapproval, adjustment. And that anticipation kills initiative. A man who is constantly corrected doesn't become better. He becomes careful, smaller, quieter in his own mind. Encouragement, by contrast, doesn't mean blind praise or empty cheerleading. It means reinforcing effort, direction, and character rather than micromanaging outcomes. It speaks to your agency, not your obedience. It says, "You are capable of figuring this out." Correction often says, "You would be capable if you did it my way." That difference matters more than most people realize. One builds internal authority. The other replaces it with dependency. Wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Encouragement aligns with this Stoic idea. It assumes you already possess the tools. Correction assumes you don't. Over time, living under constant correction subtly communicates a lack of faith in your judgment. And when someone loses faith in your judgment long enough, you start losing faith in it too. This is how a helper becomes a handler, not through domination, through over-involvement, through constant steering, through an inability to let you struggle, choose, fail internally and self-correct. What often gets labeled as support is actually interference, and interference weakens the muscle of responsibility. Stoicism teaches that strength is built through ownership, not supervision. You grow by carrying weight, not by having it adjusted every step. You can feel the shift when encouragement disappears. Conversations become instructional. Suggestions turn into expectations. Guidance becomes correction. And suddenly, your inner world isn't yours anymore, it's under review. You're not being inspired forward, you're being managed sideways. Desire fades in this environment. Not just romantic desire, but life force, drive, boldness. Because nothing bold survives under constant critique. Now here, where this turns inward, because Stoicism always turns inward. You don't regain strength by blaming. You regain it by reclaiming your frame. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If correction has crept into your life, the response isn't resistance or resentment. It's self-command. It's deciding that you will no longer outsource your confidence or direction. Encouragement begins with you. One practical exercise is silence paired with action. When correction appears, unsolicited, habitual, or unnecessary, don't argue, don't defend, don't explain. Simply note it internally and continue acting from your values. Stoicism teaches restraint as power. Over time, consistent, grounded action speaks louder than any debate. You don't need permission to trust yourself. You demonstrate trust through behavior. Another exercise is intentional self-validation. At the end of each day, ask yourself 3 questions. Did I act according to my principles? Did I take responsibility without resentment? Did I make decisions from clarity rather than fear? This trains your nervous system to look inward for approval. Encouragement becomes internalized. And when encouragement comes from within, external correction loses its grip. It's also essential to understand that encouragement invites polarity, while correction flattens it. Encouragement respects difference. It allows 2 strong individuals to exist side by side without hierarchy. Correction introduces a quiet hierarchy, one who knows, one who must be adjusted. Attraction struggles to survive in hierarchies disguised as partnerships. Stoicism values mutual respect rooted in self-mastery, not mutual monitoring rooted in anxiety. You are not meant to be handled. You are meant to be helped by someone who believes in your capacity, not someone who feels compelled to shape you. And you reinforce this by how you carry yourself. Calm, decisive, unapologetic, open to feedback but not dependent on it. The Stoics were clear: take counsel but never surrender your inner throne. Encouragement feels like wind at your back. Correction feels like hands on the wheel. One makes you stronger, the other makes you passive. And the shift away from correction doesn't begin with confrontation. It begins with embodiment, with becoming so grounded in your direction that micromanagement has nowhere to land. End your reflection here tonight. Where have I allowed correction to replace encouragement in my life? And where can I reclaim authorship without anger, without ego, without noise? The answer won't require a speech. It will require posture, presence, consistency. Encouragement is not loud, it's trusting. Correction is not always cruel, but it is heavy. And Stoicism teaches you to put down what weakens you, quietly, firmly, and without asking permission. Number 3. Respecting autonomy versus managing outcomes. At the heart of this tension, helper versus handler, is a single, often unspoken question. Do you respect autonomy or do you try to manage outcomes? The difference may seem subtle, even loving on the surface, but it changes everything. One preserves dignity, the other quietly erodes it. You can feel it when it's happening. There's a difference between support that strengthens and guidance that suffocates. One says, "I trust you." The other whispers, "I don't think you'll get it right unless I intervene." And once that dynamic sets in, attraction, respect, and polarity begin to shift in ways that are hard to reverse. From a Stoic perspective, autonomy is sacred, not as a political idea but as a psychological one. Epictetus was relentless on this point. If you wish to be free, do not seek to control what you cannot control. When someone begins managing outcomes, nudging decisions, steering behavior, correcting paths before they're even chosen, it's usually driven by anxiety, not wisdom. The intention may feel protective, even helpful, but the effect is constraining. You stop being a partner in growth and start becoming a regulator of behavior. And nothing kills respect faster than feeling managed. You see, autonomy isn't about neglect or indifference. It's about restraint. It's the discipline to let another adult experience ownership over their choices, including the discomfort that comes with uncertainty. Respecting autonomy means you resist the urge to preempt outcomes. You don't rush to fix, steer, optimize, or pre-decide. You allow space. And space is where competence, confidence, and self-trust are built. When that space disappears, so does the sense of agency. Stoicism teaches that every person has an inner faculty of choice that must remain untouched. When you violate that, even with good intentions, you undermine the very strength you claim to support. Reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. In modern terms, the best support is not to become a silent controller. When you manage outcomes, you subtly communicate doubt. Doubt in judgment, doubt in resilience, doubt in capability. And over time, that doubt becomes internalized. This is where many relationships slide from partnership into supervision. Decisions become negotiations, actions become monitored, independence becomes suspicious. The handler mindset believes peace comes from predictability, from reducing risk, from steering things toward a preferred result. But Stoicism flips that entirely. Peace comes from accepting uncertainty, not eliminating it. Strength comes from allowing others to exercise choice, not from orchestrating their behavior. You may notice that managing outcomes often comes with language that sounds reasonable, even caring. It's just more efficient. I'm thinking long-term. I'm trying to help you avoid mistakes. But embedded in that language is a quiet refusal to tolerate another person's autonomy. It's a discomfort with not being in control. And Stoicism would say this discomfort is the real work. Not fixing the other person, but disciplining your own need to interfere. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here isn't rebellion. It's self-mastery. It's the ability to stand calmly while someone else chooses a path you wouldn't have chosen. Respecting autonomy means you allow outcomes you don't control, without rushing in to correct the narrative. Managing outcomes means you treat adulthood like a shared project that must be micromanaged. One builds respect, the other breeds quiet resentment. What's often missed is that autonomy is deeply attractive, not because it's distant, but because it's confident. When you don't hover, don't correct prematurely, don't manage emotional reactions for others, you create psychological gravity. You show that you trust life enough to let it unfold. That trust signals strength. The handler, on the other hand, signals fear. Fear of loss, fear of chaos, fear of being uncomfortable. And fear, no matter how dressed up, is felt. Stoicism doesn't tell you to withdraw care, it tells you to refine it. Care becomes cleaner when it's offered without control. Support becomes powerful when it's not attached to an outcome. You can listen without steering. You can encourage without directing. You can be present without managing. This takes discipline. It goes against the modern impulse to optimize everything and everyone, but it restores balance. Here's a practical exercise rooted in Stoic training. For the next week, practice deliberate non-intervention. When you feel the urge to correct, suggest, optimize, or manage, pause. Ask yourself, is this within my control? If it isn't, release it. Sit with the discomfort. Let silence do some of the work. This isn't passivity, it's restraint. And restraint is strength. Another exercise is outcome fasting. Choose one area where you typically care too much about how things turn out. Consciously detach from the result. Focus only on your own conduct, your tone, your presence, your boundaries. Stoicism teaches that virtue lies in intention and action, not in guaranteed results. When you stop managing outcomes, you reclaim your own autonomy too. You're no longer emotionally tethered to how someone else performs. You can also practice nightly reflection, a habit himself used. Ask, did I respect autonomy today, or did I try to control comfort? There's no judgment here, only awareness. Over time, you'll notice a shift. Conversations feel lighter, tension decreases, respect has room to breathe. When you stop handling life for others, you invite them to stand up on their own. Modern dynamics often confuse involvement with control. Stoicism cuts through that confusion. It reminds you that the strongest support you can offer is trust. Trust in another person's capacity. Trust in uncertainty. Trust in yourself to remain steady without pulling strings behind the scenes. Respecting autonomy doesn't guarantee outcomes. Nothing does. But managing outcomes almost guarantees resentment. If you want strength instead of compliance, respect instead of quiet resistance, partnership instead of supervision, then this is the discipline to adopt. Let go of the handler's grip. Stand in the helper's calm. And remember, you don't build strong individuals by managing their lives. You build them by honoring their freedom. Number 4, trust incompetence versus constant oversight. There's a subtle but powerful difference between trust and oversight, and you can feel it immediately when it's present or when it's missing. Trust incompetence is quiet. It doesn't hover. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't double-check every move just to soothe anxiety. It assumes strength before demanding proof. Constant oversight, on the other hand, is noisy. It disguises itself as care, involvement, or just trying to help, but beneath it lives doubt. And doubt, when repeated often enough, reshapes the entire dynamic between two people. You already know this instinctively. When someone truly trusts you, your nervous system relaxes. You think more clearly. You act more decisively. You become sharper, calmer, more grounded. But when someone watches your every step, corrects before completion, or inserts control where none was requested, something inside you tightens. Not because you can't handle responsibility, but because responsibility without trust feels like a test you're expected to fail. The Stoics were unflinching about this. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." But that wisdom only works in an environment where competence is assumed, not constantly questioned. Oversight that stems from insecurity erodes confidence on both sides. One becomes rigid and defensive. The other becomes anxious and controlling. Neither grows. In modern dynamics, this tension often shows up as a confusion between helping and handling. Helping is collaborative. It strengthens the other person's agency. Handling is supervisory. It replaces agency with compliance. One says, "I believe in your capacity." The other says, "I don't trust you to get this right unless I'm involved." Even when spoken gently, the message lands the same. You can feel the shift when trust gives way to monitoring. Decisions start to feel provisional, always subject to review. Initiative slows down. Risk-taking disappears. Creativity dries up. Why move decisively when every move will be second-guessed? Why own responsibility when ownership comes without authority? What begins as involvement quietly becomes control, and control always demands justification. So it multiplies. Warned against this impulse in himself when he wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years." Oversight often comes from fear that something will go wrong, fear that loss is imminent, fear that letting go equals negligence. But Stoicism teaches you to release the illusion of total control. You cannot manage life into perfection. You can only cultivate character and competence, and then allow them to operate. Trust in competence is an act of courage. It means accepting uncertainty. It means allowing space for mistakes without rushing in to prevent them. Constant oversight feels safer in the short term, but it weakens the structure over time. It creates dependency instead of resilience. The more you manage, the less the other person develops internal command. And eventually, the handler becomes exhausted by the very system they created. You don't build strong dynamics by supervising adults. You build them by respecting autonomy. Seneca captured this when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Oversight communicates the opposite of that freedom. It says mastery must be externally enforced. Trust says mastery is expected. If you find yourself under constant oversight, the work begins internally. Stoicism never starts with blame. It starts with sovereignty. You stop asking for permission where competence is already present. You act cleanly, decisively, without resentment. You let results speak louder than defense. You refuse to perform incompetence to justify control. Calm excellence is disarming. It exposes unnecessary oversight without confrontation. If you find yourself providing the oversight, the work is harder and more important. You must interrogate your need to monitor. Ask yourself what you're actually trying to regulate. Is it outcomes or is it your own anxiety? Is it efficiency or is it fear of losing relevance or control? Epictetus reminded his students, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. If you wish to be a helper, you must behave like one. Helpers empower, handlers constrain. A powerful Stoic exercise here is restraint through silence. When the impulse to intervene appears, pause, breathe, ask, is this truly necessary or is it soothing my discomfort? Let space do the work. Trust often feels like inaction, but it's not. It's disciplined non-interference. It's strength held back, not weakness avoided. Another practice is competence recognition. Make it a habit, internally, not to acknowledge the other person's capability without attaching conditions. Not "I trust you," but just trust, clean, undiluted. The mind adapts to the expectations placed upon it. When competence is assumed, it often rises to meet that assumption. When it's doubted, it withers. There's also a deeper layer beneath all of this: identity. Oversight can become a way of staying needed. If the other person becomes fully competent and autonomous, what role do you play? Stoicism cuts through this illusion mercilessly. Your value does not come from managing others. It comes from mastering yourself. Wrote, waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. Being one includes knowing when to step back. The paradox is that trust strengthens bonds while oversight strains them. Trust invites partnership. Oversight invites resistance. Even when no words are spoken, the emotional math is always calculated. Freedom builds loyalty. Control builds distance. End your day with a simple reflection. Ask yourself, did I act today from trust or from fear? Did I allow competence to breathe or did I crowd it? This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Stoicism isn't passive, it's precise. It teaches you to remove what weakens human dynamics and preserve what strengthens them. When trust replaces oversight, something powerful happens. People rise, tension softens, respect deepens, and the relationship stops feeling like supervision and starts feeling like alignment. That shift begins with you choosing courage over control, confidence over correction, and trust over the illusion of safety. Number 5. Cooperation versus control. At the heart of modern relationships sits a quiet tension that rarely gets named directly: cooperation versus control. On the surface, both can look similar. Both can wear the language of care. Both can sound reasonable. Both can even claim love as their motive. But one builds strength, attraction, and mutual respect over time, while the other slowly drains vitality from the connection. And if you're honest with yourself, you can usually feel the difference long before you can explain it. Cooperation feels light. It moves, it adapts, it trusts. Control feels tight. It monitors, it corrects, it manages. Cooperation says, I walk beside you. Control says, I need to steer you. And the danger today isn't open domination. It's subtle management disguised as concern, efficiency, or emotional intelligence. You're not being told what to do outright. You're being guided, nudged, framed, and emotionally calibrated. Over time, that distinction matters more than people realize. The Stoics were deeply suspicious of anything that weakened inner sovereignty. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Cooperation respects self-mastery. Control quietly erodes it. When a relationship shifts from mutual support into quiet supervision, something essential changes. You stop feeling like a partner and start feeling like a project. And desire, whether emotional or physical, does not survive in environments where autonomy is constantly negotiated. Control often enters relationships wearing a friendly mask. It doesn't announce itself as domination. It arrives as over-involvement, as excessive input, as emotional leverage, as constant help that isn't actually requested. The problem isn't guidance, it's insistence. The problem isn't care, it's correction. And the moment your decisions are subtly filtered, reviewed, or emotionally rewarded and punished, the balance of power has already shifted. Cooperation requires trust. Control is born from fear, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing influence, fear of outcomes that can't be predicted or managed. Stoicism teaches radical acceptance of uncertainty. Reminded himself, do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others. Control does the opposite. It fixates. It interferes. It tries to guarantee emotional safety by limiting freedom. And yet the irony is brutal. Control creates the very instability it claims to prevent. You can sense when cooperation is present because there is space. Silence isn't threatening. Disagreement doesn't feel like rebellion. Independence isn't punished. In control-based dynamics, everything becomes emotionally charged. Small decisions carry symbolic weight. Neutral actions are interpreted. Autonomy feels risky. Over time, you may notice yourself self-editing, not out of respect, but out of exhaustion. That's not harmony. That's compliance. Stoicism doesn't teach you to dominate or submit. It teaches you to stand firmly within yourself. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Freedom inside a relationship is not the absence of commitment. It's the absence of fear-driven influence. Cooperation thrives when both people are grounded enough to allow friction without panic. Control emerges when one side cannot tolerate discomfort, and tries to regulate it through authority, emotion, or moral framing. Here, where you come back into focus, you cannot control whether someone chooses cooperation or control, but you can control what you reward, what you tolerate, and how you show up. The Stoic path begins with clarity. You start by observing patterns instead of reacting to them. You notice when support feels empowering and when it feels like surveillance. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You stop justifying your autonomy. Calm presence becomes your boundary. A practical Stoic exercise is negative visualization, not to induce fear but to dissolve it. Ask yourself, if I fully claimed my independence, what am I afraid would happen? Sit with that question, not emotionally, rationally. Often the fear isn't loss of love, it's loss of approval, comfort, or predictability. Stoicism teaches you to make peace with those losses in advance. When fear loses its grip, control loses its leverage. Another daily habit is intentional restraint. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as strength. You do narrate every decision. You don't preemptively defend your choices. You let your actions stand on their own. This isn't withdrawal, it's self-trust. Rote, stand straight, not straightened. Cooperation meets you when you stand straight. Control pushes back when it realizes you won't bend easily. It's also essential to examine your own behavior. Control isn't a one-sided phenomenon. You may unknowingly invite it by outsourcing responsibility, seeking permission, or avoiding decisive action. Stoicism demands personal responsibility first. When you lead yourself well, emotionally, mentally, physically, you reduce the vacuum that control often rushes to fill. Strength discourages management. Clarity discourages interference. Modern dynamics often confuse emotional availability with emotional accessibility. Cooperation allows access without entitlement. Control assumes access by default. One respects boundaries, the other resents them. When boundaries are calmly enforced, not argued, not dramatized, something powerful happens. Either cooperation emerges or the need for control becomes obvious. In both cases, you gain truth, and truth is always preferable to quiet resentment. End your day with a simple reflection. Ask yourself, did I act today from grounded confidence or from the need to be managed or to manage? Did I allow space without anxiety? Did I respect autonomy without withdrawal? Stoicism isn't about winning power struggles. It's about dissolving them entirely by refusing to play from fear. Cooperation is a choice between equals. Control is a strategy born of insecurity. When you cultivate self-mastery, emotional discipline, and inner calm, you naturally shift the dynamic. You stop negotiating your sovereignty. You stop mistaking control for care. And you create the conditions where cooperation becomes the only healthy option left. That is not dominance, that is Stoic strength. Number 6, emotional backing versus emotional regulation. There's a subtle but powerful line between emotional backing and emotional regulation, and if you don't learn to see it clearly, you end up handing over something that should never be outsourced, your inner authority. Emotional backing is support. Emotional regulation is control. One strengthens you, the other slowly trains you to doubt yourself, and the danger is that they can feel almost identical at first. Both sound caring. Both use the language of concern. Both arrive wrapped in reassurance. But only one leaves you more grounded than before. The Stoics were relentless about this distinction. Epictetus said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" That statement isn't cold, it's sovereign. It shows a man who can process emotion internally without needing someone else to stabilize him. Emotional backing respects that capacity. Emotional regulation replaces it. When someone backs you emotionally, they don't absorb your feelings for you. They don't manage your reactions. They don't step in to steer your internal state. They stand beside you while you stand on your own feet. They encourage clarity, not dependency. Regulation, on the other hand, subtly teaches you that your emotions are dangerous unless filtered, softened, approved, or reframed by someone else. Over time, you stop trusting your own inner compass. You begin checking in, seeking permission, adjusting how you feel to maintain harmony. You can feel the difference in your body. Emotional backing leaves you calmer but still solid. Emotional regulation leaves you calmer but smaller. One says, "I trust you to handle yourself." The other says, "I'll handle this for you." And while that may feel supportive in the short term, in the long term it hollows you out. Warned himself, do not give your mind to things that are not your own. Your emotional world is your responsibility. The moment someone else becomes the regulator of it, you've surrendered ground. In modern dynamics, this confusion is everywhere. You're encouraged to talk, share, open up, but not always to integrate, discipline, or master what you reveal. Emotional expression without emotional sovereignty creates imbalance. When one person becomes the emotional manager, they also become the emotional gatekeeper. They decide which feelings are acceptable, which reactions are too much, which states need correction. Slowly, unconsciously, you begin to perform emotional compliance instead of emotional honesty. Stoicism teaches something radically different. It teaches that emotions are impressions, not commands. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Emotional backing helps you remember that truth. Emotional regulation often reinforces the imagination. It treats every feeling as something that must be soothed externally instead of examined internally. And when you're trained to seek soothing instead of clarity, strength erodes. This is where you need to act deliberately. The habit to build is internal processing before external sharing. Before you look for reassurance, you sit with the feeling. You name it. You interrogate it. You ask, is this within my control? Is this a judgment or a fact? Is this emotion asking to be obeyed or understood? This pause alone changes everything. It restores hierarchy. You first, then the world. A practical Stoic exercise you can use daily is negative visualization, not to become pessimistic, but to reduce emotional volatility. You briefly imagine loss, criticism, resistance, not dramatically, calmly. You rehearse steadiness. This trains your nervous system to regulate itself. When you do seek emotional backing after that, it becomes a choice, not a necessity. You are sharing strength, not seeking rescue. Another exercise is voluntary emotional restraint. For a set period, you stop narrating every feeling. You let emotions pass through without commentary. You observe rather than broadcast. Epictetus called this training freedom. When you prove to yourself that you can carry your own internal weather, you stop needing someone else to hold the umbrella. And paradoxically, this makes genuine support more available because it's no longer demanded. There's also a deeper layer here. Emotional regulation by another person often masquerades as care, but it subtly shifts power. The one who regulates becomes indispensable. The one being regulated becomes dependent. Stoicism aims for the opposite. It aims for mutual strength. Two sovereign individuals, not one stabilizing the other. Reminded himself, be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved and the raging of the sea falls still around it. You are meant to be that rock for yourself first. This doesn't mean emotional isolation. Stoicism is not withdrawal from connection. It's refinement of it. Emotional backing should amplify your agency, not replace it. The moment you notice yourself deferring your emotional authority, waiting for permission to feel calm, confident, resolved, you pause and reclaim it. You remind yourself, my emotions are my training ground, not someone else's responsibility. End each day with a short reflection. Ask yourself, did I regulate myself today or did I outsource that task? Did I seek understanding or soothing? Did I respond from discipline or from dependency? These questions sharpen awareness. Awareness builds choice. Choice builds strength. In the end, emotional backing is a gift. Emotional regulation is a crutch. One walks beside you. The other teaches you not to walk alone. Stoicism asks you to become unshakable from the inside out, not hardened, not closed, but steady. When you master your inner world, support becomes a bonus, not a requirement. And that shift changes everything. Number 7, shared vision versus imposed direction. There's a quiet but decisive difference between walking toward a shared vision and being steered by an imposed direction. You can feel it even if you've never named it. One feels expansive, voluntary, alive. The other feels heavy, corrective, subtly suffocating. And in modern relationships, this difference is where harmony either deepens or quietly collapses. A shared vision is something you step into. An imposed direction is something you're pushed toward. One invites your strength. The other manages your behavior. And the danger isn't always obvious because imposed direction rarely announces itself loudly. It often arrives disguised as concern, guidance, help, or improvement. But underneath it, there's a subtle message. I don't trust your internal compass. Over time, that message reshapes the dynamic in ways that drain polarity, attraction, and mutual respect. The Stoics understood this distinction deeply, even though they spoke about it in broader terms of autonomy and virtue. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A shared vision honors self-mastery. It assumes you are capable of governing your own direction. Imposed direction replaces that assumption with supervision, and supervision kills inspiration. You don't rise into your best self when you're being managed. You comply, you shrink, or you resist. You can sense when a relationship shifts from alignment to control. The language changes. Encouragement turns into correction. Suggestions become expectations. Support quietly morphs into oversight. What once felt like partnership begins to feel like governance. And the irony is that this usually happens in the name of progress, growth, stability, what's best for us. But growth that is enforced is not growth, it's obedience. And obedience breeds resentment, not strength. Shared vision requires something uncomfortable, patience. It means allowing space for timing, learning curves, missteps, and self-discovery. It means trusting that direction emerges from character, not coercion. Wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like that." Applied here, the wisdom is simple. Don't become the force that robs another person of their agency, even if you believe you know better, especially then. Imposed direction often comes from anxiety, not wisdom. Anxiety about uncertainty, anxiety about outcomes, anxiety about losing control. And instead of regulating that anxiety internally, it gets projected outward as guidance, pressure, or correction. But when one person becomes the navigator and the other becomes the vessel, polarity dissolves. Desire fades. Respect erodes. You don't admire someone you feel you're managing. And you don't feel powerful when you're being handled. A shared vision, on the other hand, doesn't need micromanagement. It's rooted in values, not tactics. Direction is discussed, not dictated. Alignment is felt, not enforced. Both people are moving forward because they want to, not because they're being steered. This creates energy instead of friction, momentum instead of drag, and most importantly, dignity instead of compliance. Stoicism teaches you to distinguish what is yours to govern from what is not. Your actions, your standards, your discipline, these are yours. Another person's path, pace, and process are not. When you blur that boundary, you don't create closeness. You create dependency or defiance, sometimes both. Seneca cautioned, "He who is brave is free." Freedom is not chaos. It's responsibility owned from the inside, not imposed from the outside. If you feel yourself becoming reactive to direction, it's often because something in you knows it's being. Your instincts aren't being consulted, they're being corrected. Over time, this erodes initiative. Why lead when you'll be redirected? Why strive when your effort will be revised? This is how capable people slowly disengage, not out of laziness but out of emotional exhaustion. Here, where Stoic action comes in. The first practice is reclaiming authorship of your direction. You stop outsourcing your sense of purpose. You clarify your values. You define your standards. You move with quiet certainty instead of defensive explanation. When your direction is internally anchored, it doesn't need to be defended, and it can't easily be controlled. A practical exercise. Each morning, write one sentence answering this question. What am I moving toward today because it aligns with who I choose to be? Not because it pleases someone. Not because it avoids conflict. Because it reflects your inner code. Over time, this sharpens your self-trust. And self-trust changes how others relate to you. Another exercise is practicing calm refusal without hostility. When direction feels imposed, resist the urge to argue or justify. Simply pause, breathe, and respond from principle, not emotion. Stoicism teaches that you don't need to win every exchange, you need to remain intact. When you stop reacting and start responding from clarity, imposed direction often loses its power. This isn't about dominance, it's about sovereignty. A shared vision emerges when two sovereign individuals choose alignment. It cannot be manufactured through pressure. It cannot be sustained through management. It lives in mutual respect, patience, and the quiet confidence that both people are capable of steering themselves. End each day with reflection. Ask yourself, did I act today from inner authority or external approval? Did I move toward alignment, or did I allow myself to be redirected out of fear? Reminded himself, stand up straight, not straightened. That single line contains everything you need. Be upright from within. When you do, shared vision becomes possible, and imposed direction becomes unnecessary. Number 8, partnership mindset, vs. authority mindset. When the mindset is partnership, energy flows horizontally. When the mindset shifts to authority, energy starts moving vertically, and that subtle change alters everything. You can feel it long before you can name it. Conversations carry weight instead of warmth. Suggestions sound like instructions. Cooperation quietly turns into supervision. And without realizing it, what once felt like building with you starts feeling like being managed over you. This is not about villainizing anyone. It's about recognizing a pattern that drains polarity, dulls respect, and slowly erodes attraction. The Stoics were obsessed with roles, not in a rigid sense but in a functional one. Wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Partnership operates on this clarity. Each person knows their lane, respects the other's autonomy, and contributes without trying to dominate the direction. Authority mindset, on the other hand, thrives on control disguised as concern. It doesn't say, let's move together. It says, I know better. And once that tone enters the relationship, friction becomes inevitable. You may notice how partnership feels expansive. It invites initiative. It rewards competence. It allows you to lead without resistance and to listen without feeling diminished. Authority mindset does the opposite. It corrects instead of collaborates. It monitors instead of trusts. It frames disagreement as defiance rather than dialogue. And over time, you either shrink to keep the peace or harden to defend your ground. Neither creates intimacy. Neither creates desire. Neither creates respect. From a Stoic perspective, the issue is not power, it's misplaced control. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Authority mindset cannot tolerate uncertainty or surrender. Partnership can. Authority needs to be right. Partnership needs to be aligned. One builds tension. The other builds momentum. When one person assumes the role of handler rather than helper, the relationship becomes asymmetrical. And asymmetry breeds quiet resentment on both sides. What's dangerous is how socially rewarded authority mindset has become. It often hides behind words like strong, independent, or knows what she wants. But strength without restraint becomes domination. Independence without cooperation becomes isolation. Knowing what you want without regard for shared direction becomes tyranny in soft packaging. Stoicism teaches balance, power with humility, confidence with restraint, leadership without ego. You can feel the difference in how decisions are approached. Partnership asks, "How do we solve this together?" Authority asks, "Why haven't you done this yet?" One invites agency, the other erodes it. And agency is deeply tied to masculine identity and sexual polarity. When your agency is constantly questioned or something in you shuts down, you may still comply, but you stop initiating. And when initiation dies, so does attraction. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Freedom inside a relationship is not chaos, it's trust. Partnership trusts your judgment, your timing, your competence. Authority mindset assumes you must be guided, corrected, or steered. Over time, this dynamic trains passivity or rebellion, never strength. And a relationship without strength on both sides becomes brittle. Here, where responsibility comes back to you. Stoicism never teaches victimhood, it teaches sovereignty. If authority mindset takes root, it's often because boundaries were unclear, leadership was inconsistent, or self-command was outsourced. Authority fills vacuums. Partnership requires presence. When you hesitate to lead your own life, someone else will attempt to do it for you. Not always maliciously, often unconsciously. The corrective action is not confrontation, it's embodiment. You do not argue authority away. You render it unnecessary. You become decisive without being reactive, calm without being passive, firm without being aggressive. Reminded himself daily, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Partnership responds to grounded leadership. Authority loses power when there is nothing left to manage. A powerful Stoic exercise here is the discipline of response. For a period of time, refuse to emotionally react to corrective tones, micromanagement, or unsolicited direction. Not through silence filled with resentment, but through calm acknowledgement followed by independent action. You don't defend. You don't explain excessively. You act, consistently, quietly. Authority mindset feeds on engagement. Partnership grows in calm certainty. Another practice is internal auditing. Ask yourself daily, where am I relinquishing responsibility and then resenting the control that follows? Stoicism is ruthless about self-honesty. You cannot complain about being handled if you are not fully handling your own life, your schedule, your body, your mission, your emotional regulation. Authority mindset often steps in where discipline is absent. This is not about dominance games. Stoicism rejects theatrics. It's about alignment with nature. Two capable adults walking side by side, not one pulling the other. Partnership is erotic because it preserves polarity without force. Authority kills polarity because it collapses it into hierarchy. Desire does not flow upward towards supervision. It flows laterally between equals who respect each other's competence. You may also need to release the need to be understood. Authority mindset thrives on emotional explanation. Partnership respects action. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When you stop justifying yourself and start trusting your own judgment, the relational dynamic shifts. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. End each day with a Stoic reflection. Ask yourself, did I move today as a partner or as a subordinate? Did I lead my life clearly or did I wait for permission? Did I respond with calm strength or with emotional negotiation? This is not about blame. It's about reclaiming your center. When partnership replaces authority, respect returns. When respect returns, attraction has room to breathe. And that transformation doesn't start with changing someone else's mindset. It starts with mastering your own. Number 9. Accountability offered versus accountability enforced. There's a subtle but critical difference between accountability that is offered and accountability that is enforced, and most people don't notice the shift until it's already draining the life out of them. On the surface, both look similar. Both use the language of growth, support, and wanting the best. But underneath, one strengthens you while the other slowly replaces your spine with permission slips. One respects your agency. The other quietly assumes authority over it. And if you're honest with yourself, you can feel the difference in your body long before you can explain it with words. Accountability offered feels clean. It arrives without pressure. It says, "I trust you to choose well and I'm here if you want support." Accountability enforced feels heavy. It carries expectation, monitoring, correction. It says, "I know better and you'll be better if you follow my lead." The danger is that enforced accountability often disguises itself as care. It uses concern as camouflage. But Stoicism teaches you to look past appearances and examine function. Wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The same principle applies here. If accountability removes your self-command, it isn't help. It's control wearing a softer voice. You already know this intuitively. When accountability is offered, you feel stronger afterward. When it's enforced, you feel smaller. One expands your sense of responsibility, the other transfers it, and this is where the dynamic quietly turns from partnership into management. You stop asking yourself what you think is right and start asking what will keep the peace. Your internal compass gets outsourced, not dramatically, gradually, one correction at a time, one raised eyebrow, one disappointed tone. One, "I'm just trying to help," layered over a judgment you didn't consent to. The Stoics were relentless about personal sovereignty. Epictetus was blunt. No man is free who is not master of himself. Enforced accountability violates this at the root. It assumes that your judgment is insufficient and must be supervised. Over time, this doesn't make you better. It makes you dependent, hesitant, internally split. You start second-guessing your instincts. You delay decisions. You explain yourself too much. Not because you're incapable, but because you've been conditioned to expect review. Offered accountability, on the other hand, sharpens you. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't hover. It doesn't remind you who's watching. It respects timing and autonomy. It trusts that if you fall short, you'll correct yourself. And paradoxically, that trust often makes you more disciplined, not less. Responsibility grows best when it's chosen, not imposed. Seneca captured this when he said, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here isn't loud defiance. It's quiet ownership of your choices, including your mistakes. What complicates this dynamic is that enforced accountability often starts with good intentions. It may even begin because you allowed it. You welcomed guidance. You appreciated structure, but at some point, guidance became governance. And you didn't notice the moment it crossed the line because it didn't announce itself. It normalized itself. This is why Stoicism insists on constant self-examination, not paranoia, awareness. You are meant to rule yourself. Any system, relationship, or dynamic that subtly undermines that should be questioned, even if it feels comfortable. Ask yourself this without defensiveness. Are you being held accountable or are you being managed? Do reminders feel optional or compulsory? Do suggestions feel like invitations or directives? Do you feel trusted to self-correct or monitored to comply? Your nervous system knows the answer before your intellect does. Calm is a sign of alignment. Tension is a signal of intrusion. This doesn't mean rejecting accountability. Stoics welcomed correction. They sought mentors, they valued feedback, but the distinction was always consent and self-command. You choose who corrects you. You choose which standards you live by. You choose when and how you improve. When accountability is enforced, improvement is no longer self-driven. It becomes performance, and performance erodes integrity. You do things to avoid friction, not because you believe in them. Here, where action matters. The first practice is reclaiming internal authority. Every day, deliberately make small decisions without explaining them, not defiantly, calmly. Let your actions stand without justification. This retrains your mind to trust itself again. Remind it himself, do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Decide, act, adjust, move forward. Life doesn't require approval. The second exercise is boundary clarity. When feedback is offered, pause before accepting it. Ask yourself silently, is this aligned with my values or theirs? You don't have to reject advice to remain sovereign. You only have to evaluate it consciously. Taking everything in without filtering weakens you. Stoicism is not about openness without discernment. It's about disciplined selectivity. Another powerful habit is voluntary self-accountability. Set standards for yourself and keep them privately. Train, read, reflect, improve without announcing it. When you are visibly self-governing, external enforcement loses its grip. People stop hovering when they sense inner order. Authority respects authority, even unspoken. End your day with a Stoic reflection. Ask yourself, did I act today from inner conviction or external pressure? Did I correct myself before anyone else needed to? Did I live by my standards or perform for someone else's comfort? This isn't about blame, it's about alignment. Accountability offered supports this process. Accountability enforced interrupts it. The strongest position you can occupy is not resistance and not submission, but self-rule. When accountability is offered, you can accept it freely. When it's enforced, you have a responsibility to yourself to question it, because the goal is not to be handled well. The goal is to be whole, disciplined, and self-directed, and no one can do that work for you. Number 10, empowerment through belief versus influence through pressure. There's a subtle but powerful difference between being empowered by belief and being influenced by pressure, and you can feel it immediately once you become aware of it. Belief feels light. It expands you. It strengthens your spine without tightening your chest. Pressure, on the other hand, feels heavy even when it's disguised as care. It moves you, yes, but not from your center. It pushes you from the outside, slowly teaching you that peace comes only when you comply. And this distinction matters more today than ever, because modern relationships are quietly shaped by it every single day. True empowerment is quiet. It doesn't hover. It doesn't monitor. It doesn't correct your tone, pace, ambition, or direction under the banner of support. It trusts your capacity to think, choose, fail, learn, and rise. Influence through pressure does the opposite. It keeps a mental hand on the steering wheel. It rewards compliance with approval and punishes independence with withdrawal. Over time, you stop asking, "What do I believe?" and start asking, "What will keep things calm?" That's not empowerment, that's conditioning. The Stoics warned against this long before modern language existed to describe it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." When your decisions are shaped by emotional pressure rather than internal conviction, self-mastery erodes. You may still be functioning, still achieving, still appearing stable, but something inside you becomes quieter, less decisive, less alive. You begin outsourcing your judgment, not because you're incapable, but because resistance feels costly. Belief-based empowerment works differently. It assumes you are competent. It doesn't need to manage you. It offers perspective, not pressure. It invites reflection instead of demanding alignment. And because it doesn't threaten emotional consequences, you remain free to disagree, pause, or take a different path. That freedom is what keeps respect alive. Pressure may achieve short-term compliance, but belief builds long-term strength. You can feel when pressure enters the room. It shows up as urgency where none is required, as disappointment that feels preloaded, as emotional weight attached to simple choices, as the sense that love, peace, or harmony is conditional on you thinking, acting, or prioritizing a certain way. Over time, this teaches you to self-edit, not out of wisdom but out of fatigue, and fatigue is the enemy of clarity. Wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When you live under pressure, your thoughts slowly shift. You become cautious. You rehearse conversations in your head. You anticipate reactions. You trade directness for diplomacy, not because it's virtuous, but because it's easier. Belief-driven empowerment doesn't require this dance. It doesn't make you smaller so the system can feel stable. It encourages you to grow, even if that growth is inconvenient. The danger is that pressure often masquerades as concern. It sounds reasonable. It feels justified. It frames itself as guidance, wisdom, or emotional intelligence. But the test is simple. Does it allow you to fully own your choices without emotional consequence? If the answer is no, then what's happening isn't empowerment, it's influence through discomfort. And discomfort, repeated often enough, becomes control. Stoicism teaches you to return authority back to its rightful place, your own mind, not in rebellion, not in bitterness, but in calm refusal to be moved by anything that isn't aligned with reason and virtue. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here doesn't mean confrontation. It means inner independence. The courage to say, "I hear you, but I decide." The strength to stand steady without needing approval as oxygen. Here, where action begins, not by changing anyone else, but by reconditioning yourself. Start by noticing where your decisions are motivated by peacekeeping rather than principle, not in judgment, in observation. Stoicism is about awareness before action. Ask yourself regularly, am I choosing this because I believe in it or because I want to avoid emotional friction? That single question can recalibrate your entire internal compass. A practical exercise is daily internal authorship. At the end of each day, write down 3 decisions you made and why you made them. Strip away the surface reasons. Go deeper. Were they rooted in conviction or convenience, belief or pressure? You don't need to change anything immediately. Clarity comes first. Change follows naturally once you see the pattern. Another practice is emotional fasting. For short periods, remove your dependence on emotional feedback altogether. Act according to your values without checking how it lands. Speak plainly without over-explaining. Pause without filling silence. This isn't coldness, it's composure. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort won't destroy you and that you don't need emotional permission to be grounded. Empowerment through belief respects time. It understands that growth isn't linear and agreement isn't mandatory. Pressure is impatient. It wants results now, alignment now, resolution now. But anything forced collapses under its own weight eventually. Stoicism reminds you that what is built slowly, deliberately, and internally cannot be shaken easily. You're not meant to be handled. You're meant to be whole. Influence that strengthens you will always leave you more self-directed, not more dependent, more confident, not more cautious, more alive, not more managed. And the moment you start orienting your life around belief instead of pressure, something profound happens. Your posture changes. Your decisions simplify. Your presence becomes steadier. End each day with this reflection. Where did I stand in my belief today, even quietly? You don't need applause for it. You don't need permission. As reminded himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That's empowerment. And once you taste it, pressure loses its grip because you no longer belong to it. Before you click away, sit with this one thought. The Stoics believed that freedom begins the moment you stop outsourcing your judgment. Warned that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And that single line explains everything you've just heard. The question was never whether modern women are helpers or handlers. The real question is whether you are clear, grounded, and self-directed enough to invite cooperation instead of control. Because when a man lacks direction, someone else will supply it. And when a man knows exactly who he is and where he's going, interference becomes unnecessary. You don't win by arguing roles. You win by embodying responsibility. You don't demand respect. You make yourself impossible to manage. Calm decisions, firm boundaries, no resentment, no explanation, just quiet certainty. If this video made you uncomfortable, that's good. Discomfort is the doorway to clarity. Take what resonated, discard what didn't, and apply what matters, starting today. If you want more insights grounded in Stoic wisdom, masculine self-mastery, and modern relationship dynamics, make sure you stay connected. Watch the next video, reflect deeply, and above all, choose to lead your life so no one feels the need to run it for you.